Mesdames, Messieurs, bienvenue dans Décryptage sur Africain 24. Karim KHAN, procureur de la Cour pénale internationale, CPI, est l'invité du jour. Il partage avec nous son point de vue et son expérience sur l'action de la Cour pénale internationale sur le continent africain. Monsieur Karim KHAN, bienvenue sur Africain 24. Commençons directement avec la République démocratique du Congo qui a déposé des plaintes auprès de la CPI contre les rebelles du M23 et l'armée rwandaise pour des massacres présumés commis dans l'est du pays et le pillage systématique des ressources naturelles. De votre côté, quelle sera la suite donnée à ces plaintes?
Well, Pozo, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to appear once again on Africa 24. The important thing to remember is this, that the ICC has been involved in the Democratic Republic of Congo since this country, out of its own sovereign will, referred the situation to my office in 2004. So for almost 20 years, next year it'll be 20 years, the ICC has been operating here. We have jurisdiction for genocide, for war crimes, for crimes against humanity. The office has diligently pursued investigations and prosecutions that have led to convictions in the case of Thomas Lubanga, Ntaganda, and Katanga. And I think we're looking at our jurisdiction, we're looking at our resources. The reason I'm here is nothing to do with the latest communication received by the DRC, because we have jurisdiction. It is to look at new partnerships so that we can talk less and deliver more. Because ultimately, words from the prosecutor, words from elected officials of the court or elected politicians in the DRC are as good as the victims and the people of the DRC view them to be. Do they feel more justice, or do they think there's a lot of hot air being spoken? And I think this is a moment where we need to find new ways to deliver concrete action to people that keep suffering at the hands of people with guns or people with weapons, violations of the human body, of the spirit, and also terrible allegations of rape that are being heard on a very regular basis.
Il y a environ 2 ans, lorsque vous avez pris fonction comme procureur général de la Cour pénale internationale, vous vous êtes engagé à reformer le bureau et à professionnaliser les méthodes de la CPI, conformément au traité de Rome. Que souhaitiez-vous changer concrètement et où en êtes-vous dans ce processus?
Well, that's a great question. I think I said exactly that. You're accurate. We've made significant change. I mean, one of the examples, I'm here now in the DRC, there had been a bit of a disconnect between the African Union and my office. I was the first prosecutor in 17 years that was invited to the African Union Heads of State Summit in Addis, and I was invited again this year, and I attended. The first leader I met from Africa upon being commencing my term was President Tshisekedi, and it was in his capacity as chair of the President of the African Union. I've gone to Senegal and Dakar and met with President Macky Sall and engaged with them also in Addis as well. I've had 4 meetings with Chair of the AU Commission, Faki. We're moving at a different pace in many situations around the world that we've talked about. I've talked about situations that have been referred by the Security Council and other situations. In terms of the overall work, we need to, I think ultimately, we still have a lot of room for improvement. We need to find new ways to build partnerships with the continent of Africa, but also other regions as well. I'm going from here to Colombia. And again, we have been focused on building partnerships, not looking at ways in which we can steal the child of justice from the mother jurisdiction, but really looking at ways in which we can work collaboratively, collegiately, in line with the principle of complementarity with different national authorities. We're doing that in Latin America, we're doing it in the Central African Republic. I want to do it here as well. And I think that new dialogue, that new partnership in which we're not trying to keep people out, but bring people in, civil society, universities, victim groups, state actors, the United Nations, I think that is what your listeners will expect, because we need to find ways in which justice is felt by those that really have suffered enormously, and they're tired of promises, they're tired of fine words. They want justice to be felt in the real world that they live in which very often is a world of insecurity and a world of lawlessness, and they need to have a realization that whatever is happening, justice is not a promise, it's a right, and we're finding ways to deliver on that together.
Votre institution, la CPI, a souvent été critiquée pour la conduite de procès impliquant des dirigeants africains. Les observateurs parlent notamment d'une cour qui ne juge que des Africains. Ils critiquent par ailleurs la lenteur des procédures. Quelles améliorations ont été apportées dans ce sens depuis votre élection?
Well, I think a lot. I go back to the issue, the new engagement with the African continent, the new activity in terms of warrant applications in many situations in Africa as well. Some of those are public, but we're no longer only focused on Africa. We have, I opened and applied for warrants in the Georgia situation, in Ukraine. We're involved in Venezuela. We're involved in Afghanistan. We're involved, in the Philippines, and the list goes on. So I think it's a realization of two points. Firstly, the overwhelming number of cases before the court were referred by the continent of Africa, and that's something Africa should be proud of, because the idea that the rule of law is owned by Europe or is owned by the global north is nonsense. It's owned by the DRC and the continent of Africa and Asia and Latin America as much as any other part of the world. And in fact, the largest group of states comes from this continent. So the African Union and the African group in the ICC is a very powerful group, a very important group. And the fact that they make up the largest single contingent of regional states shows that the rule of law is something that is not the preserve of non-Africans. Africans are in the lead. So I think that's a very positive story. But yes, we need to improve the office, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think you look at the output of my office since we've taken over, one can see by any metric much more activity, much more focus on field presence, much more imaginative ways of partnerships, whether it's in Guinea or the Central African Republic. I've signed MOUs with both, complementarity in Colombia, and I'm seeing President Tshisekedi tomorrow on this trip. And again, part of the conversation is to look at ways in which the DRC can be helped to take a more effective leadership role, and we can change our posture, continue to be a court of last resort, continue to do our own job, but try to build an alliance of other independent institutions that are giving support to the DRC to allow the DRC to fulfill its constitutional and international law obligations to its citizens, which is people have a right to live free from the types of rapes, the types of violence that too many Congolese continue to suffer. It's difficult, but I do genuinely believe that if we come together with the interests of humanity in our hearts and a collective belief that we can do better, we will do better. We certainly won't do worse. Inshallah.
Monsieur le procureur général, en septembre 2022, le président de la Cour pénale internationale a rencontré les responsables de l'Union africaine et ensemble, ils ont discuté des perspectives de développement des relations entre les deux organes. Quels sont exactement les points sur lesquels vous souhaitez renforcer la coopération avec l'institution panafricaine?
Oh, this is a very long question. In every way possible is the short answer. In every way possible. There's a lot of scope to build upon the national process of complementarity. I think this is exactly what we're trying to do here in the DRC. I mentioned we're doing it in the Central African Republic. We've done it in Guinea. This is one way. The other is new partnerships. We have very sophisticated and increasingly mature regional organizations like ECOSOC, and I think there could be a role for not ECOSOC, for ECOWAS. There's a scope for ECOWAS or the SADC or the East African community to also play a role. And of course, at the continental level, there's been a lot of discussion regarding the African Court of People and Human Rights and the Malabo Protocol. I'm not defensive. I'm not trying to keep continental organizations like the AU out or regional organizations like East African Community or out. I'm really trying to build partnerships more effectively.
Comment accompagnez-vous les pays africains à renforcer le système judiciaire afin de limiter le recours à votre juridiction? Avez-vous cette vision au sein de la Cour pénale internationale?
Yes, the ICC is predicated upon a principle of complementarity, that a state has primary responsibility, it has the primary competence to investigate and prosecute crimes within the court's jurisdiction, so genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. The ICC only comes in as a last resort. Now, the statute, for example, under Article 9310 allows the Office of the Prosecutor to provide assistance to national authorities. In fact, this is what we're doing. If you look at the Libya situation, for example, and I've spoken about this quite publicly, that we're also working with a joint investigative team with certain European states and Europol, and the evidence we've given have allowed individuals from Ethiopia and an Eritrean to be arrested, and they've been extradited for trafficking, for human trafficking, into the courts of the Netherlands and in Italy. The evidence we have provided also as part of that joint team has allowed the United Arab Emirates to lead an investigation or an operation to detain somebody from Sudan that is going to be extradited to the Netherlands. So there's so many different ways, imaginative ways, new ways in which we can work together. We're not the only show in town, the ICC. What we need to do is work with national authorities in Europe and in Africa and in Asia and in Latin America, international organizations like the United Nations, regional entities like the European Union or the African Union. We need to work with civil society. We need to work with anybody, your viewers. Everybody has a role to play to make sure that we have a better tomorrow. And I think if we think only one court can be a silver bullet to kill this, slay this, horror of impunity, we will fail. If we realize that we need to work together to make there to be less space for impunity to thrive, for these types of crimes to commit, I think we'll make more space for justice. And I think that's what your viewers want. That's what the people want. And I think that's the fundamental principle that inspires the Rome Statute, a belief that here we are in 2023 when we're going to the stars, we're looking at planets, we're making so many parts of our wildlife extinct. Why don't we try to make crimes against humanity extinct? Why don't we try to make genocide something that is extinct, something that the grandchildren of those viewers that are watching, their grandchildren may read about, not have to experience? Because the truth is, we have not delivered together. We have had a big shock to our system at the end of the Second World War with the gas chambers, when we saw how many people were gassed and killed by the Nazis, and we saw what happened in Rwanda in 1994 and what happened in Sierra Leone and Liberia and Cambodia, and the list goes on. But we're not taking enough action, and I think this is the moment for new solutions to all problems. The ICC, I think, has a very important role to play in its own system as a court of last resort, cases that we present to our judges for review and determination, but also building stronger partnerships with national authorities like the DRC and individual countries of the African Union. And I think if that imperative of serving humanity, not serving ourselves, that imperative of trying to build and play our own small roles in building a better world for the children of today and the grandchildren of tomorrow, I think hopefully we can play an important role. But we need to stop talking and start delivering. And that's on all of us to do together.
Monsieur Karim KHAN, procureur général de la Cour pénale internationale, CPI, merci d'avoir répondu aux questions d'Africa 24. Mesdames, Messieurs, merci de nous avoir suivis. C'était Décryptage, à retrouver également sur notre site www.africa24tv.com.